Here we begin with a big picture on a high-level overview of web scraping. To discuss web scraping, we first provide an analogy and then some useful terminology. First, the analogy. You have probably acted as a human web scraper at some point by using copy and paste. For instance, suppose that you wanted to complain about the Broncos roster construction to a friend. You may go to their roster webpage, for instance, and you might look at this roster and have all sorts, I don't want to subscribe to that at all sorts of commentary that you'd like to give on their current roster construction to explain all the woes that are befalling the Broncos this season. So you might copy all that data and paste it in an email. You just did web scraping. The basic idea of a web scraper is to automate this otherwise mundane human process. For instance, while a single copy and paste of roster data into a single email may not seem that annoying, imagine that you wanted to put the contents of various rosters into multiple emails because you were managing an email list for a sports website. You are going to get really annoyed very quickly with having to constantly check for updates on the rosters across all the NFL teams. However, there are some issues with this. As a human, you can use your judgment as to what data are relevant on a given web page, no matter the format. In other words, even if we are unsure of how the data will appear that we are looking for, we know it when we see it. This is a uniquely human trait that an automated web scraper simply does not possess. Now for some useful terminology. You want to be aware of two terms, fetching and scraping. What do these mean? Fetching refers to the downloading of a web page. This is like the copying step of copy and paste. This is what your browser does, whether you're using Chrome, Firefox, Safari, whatever it might be that you use as a web page. When you go to view the page, it fetches the contents, and now it's on your computer, which is why you can still view the contents of a web page even if you lose your connection to the internet. Scraping, on the other hand, refers to the extraction of data from the downloaded contents of a web page. In the analogy, this is determining what part of the copied web page data that it is you want to paste. The computers are only as smart as we are. When we look at a web page, we as humans only see what I would call the relevant information on a web page. On the other hand, a web scraper will load all of the data of a web page as raw HTML code through a fetch command. This will include metadata describing how things are supposed to look on the web page, as well as any other behind-the-scenes information. This generally means that in order to construct a useful web scraper, we, that means us as human beings, have to understand something about the HTML structure of websites and also how the data we wish to analyze from these websites is presented. This allows us to scrape only the data we want from this mess of HTML data. Consequently, web scrapers are usually built to explore web pages belonging to a very specific single website. For instance, we may create a web scraper to optimally collect statistics on various NBA players available from the website ESPN.com/NBA. So this is the NBA portion of the ESPN website. And so it has all the NBA data, including player statistical information. And so then you can browse by team, all sorts of other things that are involved there. And so each individual athlete has a separate profile web page within this website. For example, you can look at Jimmy Butler's here, and there's plenty of, when you first go there, when you view his web page, you'll see recent games, which will be different from whenever you click on it, and whatever the season is, the career statistics, and then there's all these other things to click on here, like his stats involving his regular season averages. You can go through his postseason averages, and one of the things that you might notice as you click through this is that the URL is changing each time. So there's a lot of information, I'll just close some of these tabs, that is within ESPN, and you have all of this data that's structured and really scaffolded across multiple subpages, and how that can vary can be significant from how other websites may present exactly the same data. For example, if I look at NBA.com, the official NBA website, and I look at like Jimmy Butler's profile page there, you'll see that this page looks dramatically different than the page we were just viewing. And I can also click on things like his stats here, and you can see there's the regular season stats, but just the structure is different. The table structure is different. It's trying to get me to sign up for the League Pass. But all that information is kind of presented differently. The URLs are different. So how I would design a web scraper for one website versus another could vary. Even if they have the same types of data in them, they may be structured and scaffolded across different subpages in different ways that may require me to alter how I'm going to go about scraping that data. It is also important to discuss the ethics of web scraping. Web scraping comes with some important legal and ethical concerns that we should be aware of. If you think of a web scraper as a bot, then once this bot is tuned to a website and turned loose, it can clearly gather data much faster than even an army of human processors possibly could. Subsequently, if you use the bot too aggressively, in other words, you spam the website with lots of requests for data, so it's going to try to fetch a lot of data continuously from the website, you may break the website in a sense. Moreover, the legality of web scraping is kind of murky. You should always check the terms and conditions of a website before you attempt to scrape data from it. Find and read the statements about the legal use of data, which usually does allow you to scrape data as long as it is not for commercial purposes. Some websites have a robots.txt file that may explicitly say whether or not they allow web scrapers. You may say that I'm already at an institution or with a group, or I already have all the data that I need to analyze in a file with a typical format that is understood by common data analysis programs, such as Excel or SQL. In this case, you do not need to go searching through websites, but you do need to know how to read the data from the file in order to analyze it. Your analysis may need to be added to this existing file or put in a new file to be used by others. In these cases, you also need to know how to write the data to a file in the correct format. You may even find yourself reading in data from a file, adding in new data from web scraping, and then saving that data along with any analysis of that data to an altogether new file. The basic process of reading, writing to files falls under the methods that referred to as I/O, input, output. So web scraping and I/O, reading and writing data files, make up the contents of this lecture notebook. This video was just to give you the high-level overview of what we're going to be covering. And in terms of specific learning objectives, what we're going to do is create code to scrape data, let me do that a little better, scrape data directly from websites using pandas. We are going to understand what a data frame is and how to manipulate it. And we're going to be able to create, read, and write data files into different formats. So those are our overall learning objectives, but we want to keep all these big picture ideas in mind as we go through this.